Welcome to Math with Mrs. Bibb. We're starting the PDF for week 15. Today we're going to be learning how to solve quadratics with complex solutions. Please make sure to complete your weekly warm-up. I have revised questions 1 through 4 from the original PDF for page 68. So if you'll just disregard those that are on the original PDF and just take notes using these examples that I have for 1 through 4. You will need a sheet of paper for this. I do not believe it's a student journal. And if it were a student journal, then I have changed questions 1 through 4. For 1 through 4, I just wanted to review how to solve a quadratic in different forms. We will not get complex solutions for this particular set of problems. When we do the next set, we will get some complex solutions. So let's just go ahead and solve these. Remember, your goal is to get this alone. How am I going to go about getting that alone? I'm going to add 4 first. The quantity 5x minus 2 squared equals 16. I'm going to take the square root of both sides. The quantity 5x minus 2 equals plus or minus 4. Don't forget, when you take the square root, you use plus or minus. Then I'm going to add 2 to both sides. 5x is going to equal, remember to put 2 plus or minus 4. Then divide both sides by 5. X is going to equal 2 plus or minus 4 divided by 5. I'm going to do the rest of this between those two problems. Since I don't have an irrational number here, then I need to do my two different problems. X equals 2 plus 4 divided by 5, or x equals 2 minus 4 divided by 5. So x is either 6/5 or x is negative 2/5. So for number 1, my answers are negative 2/5 and positive 6/5. That would satisfy the equation for number 1. Let's do the same thing for number 2. I'll try to write a little smaller so I'll have space to actually do question 2. I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides. I'm going to start over here. Negative 3 times the quantity 4x plus 1 squared equals negative 12. My quadratic is not alone, so I have to get rid of this negative 3 by dividing by negative 3. The quantity 4x plus 1 squared equals 4. Negative 12 divided by negative 3 is 4. Take the square root of both sides. 4x plus 1 equals plus or minus 2. Subtract 1 from both sides, so 4x will equal, oops, that was strange, will equal negative 1 plus or minus 2. Divide by 4. X will equal negative 1 plus or minus 2 divided by 4. So I have two problems here. Since I don't have a radical or an irrational number, I have to continue. X equals negative 1 plus 2 divided by 4, or x equals negative 1 minus 2 divided by 4. So x is going to equal 1/4, or x is going to equal negative 3/4. My two answers for number 2 are negative 3/4 and 1/4. Number 3 looks very strange. And when you're solving these quadratics, I don't think I've completely emphasized this, but when you're solving these quadratics, you're finding where they cross the x-axis. And where they cross the x-axis is where y is 0. So you have to make sure to set these equal to 0. That's what you have to do first. Make sure that y is replaced with 0. 0 equals 3x squared minus 18. I'm going to add 18 to both sides. 18 is going to equal 3x squared. I'm I'm going to divide both sides by 3. Go right here. X squared is going to equal 6. I'm going to take the square root of both sides. X is going to equal plus or minus. 6 is not a perfect square. The factors of 6 are 1 times 6 and 2 times 3. None of those are a perfect square, so I would just leave it as the square root of 6. My two answers are positive square root of 6 and negative square root of 6. Now for number 4, I know I don't have it equal to 0. I can. Let me show you. I'll make it equal to 0. That's perfectly fine. You just don't want an f of x in there, but watch what happens. And don't do this. I'd wait to see what I'm doing next. So now it equals 0. I don't have a y. I don't have f of x. And I want to get my x squared by itself. Let me point out really quickly that what I'm doing for number 3 and number 4 only occurs when your b value is 0. You only do what I'm doing when b is 0. So you cannot, when you have a trinomial, you cannot do what I'm doing right now. You can't move things to one side and divide. But since I don't have a b value, b is 0, I can move the 20 to the other side. I can divide by 5. I can take the square root of both sides, and x will equal plus or minus 2. That's the answer to number 4. Moving on to number 5. Number 5 is very similar to number 3. And now these final 4 questions, we're going to have complex solutions. I'm going to do them at the bottom. Remember, you want to make this equal 0. You don't want a y or a f of x or g of x. You want it to be 0. So I'm going to put 0 equals negative x squared minus 48. I'm going to add 48 to both sides. I'm going to divide by negative 1. I'm going to take the square root of both sides. I'm going to put that plus or minus sign. I'm going to take out that square root of negative 1. At the same time, I'm going to think about 48, factors of 48. 1 times 48, 2 times 24, 3 times 16, 4 times 12, 5 won't go into 48, 6 times 8, and that's it. I see 2 perfect squares. I've got a perfect square of 16 and a perfect square of 4. Choose the biggest perfect square. Always do that. So square root of 16 times the square root of 3. Plus or minus, the square root of negative 1 is I. The square root of 16 is 4 times the square root of 3. And I times 4 is 4i, so plus or minus 4i times the square root of 3 is what my value of x is. Positive 4i square root of 3, negative 4i square root of 3. Moving on to number 6, I'm going to put 0 in place of g of x. I'm going to add 13 to both sides. I'm going to multiply both sides by 4. Divide by negative 1. I could have multiplied by negative 4, but I didn't. Take the square root of both sides. Plus or minus the square root of negative 1. 52. 1 times 52. 2 times 26. Pardon me. 2 times 26. 4 times 13. So times the square root of 4 times the square root of 13. I would have plus or minus. The square root of negative 1 is I. The square root of 4 is 2 times the square root of 13. Then to finish, I'm going to have x equals plus or minus 2i square root of 13. That's the answer to number 6. Moving on to number 7. I don't have to make it equal 0. I don't have an f of x or g of x, so I can just solve this one normally. I've got x squared plus 16 equals negative 28. I'm going to subtract 16 from both sides. X squared equals negative 44. Take the square root of both sides. X is going to equal plus or minus the square root of negative 1 times factors of 44. 1 times 44, 2 times 22, 3 doesn't go into 44, 4 times 11, and I think that's it. Is there a perfect square there? Yes, 4 is a perfect square, so I need to put the square root of 4 times the square root of 11. So x will equal plus or minus, square root of negative 1 is I, square root of 4 is 2, times the square root of 11. So x will equal plus or minus 2I, square root of 11. Number 8. I'm going to multiply both sides by 3. That would give me x squared equals negative 45. Take the square root of both sides. X will equal negative 1, I'll have to take that out, sorry, plus or minus the square root of negative 1. Let me grab my eraser. Plus or minus the square root of negative 1 times factors of 45. 1 times 45, 2 doesn't divide evenly into it. 3 times 15, 4 does not divide evenly into it. 5 times 9, and I believe that's it. Do I have a perfect square in those list of factors? Yes, I do. 9 is a perfect square, so I'll put the square root of 9 times the square root of 5. Simplify each thing that can be simplified. Plus or minus the square root of negative 1 is I. The square root of 9 is 3 times the square root of 5. So x is going to equal plus or minus 3I times the square root of 5. I believe that's the last example. On the next slide, I have your assignment. So if you'll do those 15 questions, and the answers to those 15 questions are over here on the side. It does say write the letter of each answer in the box containing the exercise number, but I think what I would do is just number 1 and then write what letter I get, number 2, so on and so forth, because I kind of took away the box for a reason. You'll have your assessment sometime, and then there's your list of things that you should get finished. I hope you have a wonderful week, and if you need help with anything, please reach out to me. Let me know. I'm here to help you.